Today, the alarms are blaring on COVID-19 in Michigan. A nonprofit has a new headquarters in the city, and a few words with Fletcher Sharp. I'm Jer Stays, and welcome to your Daily Detroit for Thursday, November 12th, 2020. Let's just dive into our first story and start with the latest virus numbers. Michigan reported nearly 7,000 confirmed COVID-19 cases in the last day, along with 45 deaths. That brings our pandemic case total to north of 236,000 and 7,811 fatalities. Our positive test rate is nearly 11% on 45,000 tests a day, which has public health officials very worried. There are currently almost 3,200 people hospitalized right now. That's up from just over 900 1 month ago for COVID-19. In a call with health leaders and journalists from across the state this morning, Wright Lassiter, the head of Henry Ford Health Systems, shared how the COVID-19 situation is becoming more dire in Michigan by the day.
In the last 14 days, our COVID admissions have risen by 128%. And so we're seeing significant escalation across all of our Southeast Michigan hospitals and our Central Michigan hospitals. We have a significant burden in our emergency departments, as you heard from John Fox. Similar to the story that you just heard from Tina in Grand Rapids, the positivity rate for patients being tested in Henry Ford laboratories has risen extensively. As of this morning, it was 16.4%. Not unlike what you heard from Tina Fries-Decker. Just weeks ago, it was in the low single digits. And so it's very, very clear that we're seeing something different. We're seeing a significant escalation in the community spread of COVID-19 across all portions of Michigan, as you'll hear today.
That community spread is driving an intense spike in cases, hospitalizations, and now to an extent deaths, as 1 in 10 hospitalizations in West Michigan are resulting in a fatality. The group of healthcare leaders Thursday morning said that a full lockdown wouldn't be the best tool to address the virus at this stage, though. But what would? People not only wearing their mask and practicing good hygiene, but also not getting together in homes. That's private gatherings and small parties indoors with people they know from different households. That cross-household spread is what's driving this surge. But even the wearing of masks and social distancing is a problem in some cases, as not all people are getting with the program. In large areas of the state, people are letting their guard down or straight out refusing. Here in Metro Detroit, Macomb County is seeing double the hospitalizations than their neighboring communities, along with heavier mask resistance. Beaumont says that COVID-19 inpatients have tripled in less than 30 days across their system, and that is accelerating. And even in some hospital lobbies, they are finding resistance to mask wearing and a culture among some that just will not accept it. Here's Brian Peters of the Michigan Health and Hospital Association.
I know there is a saying in business that culture eats strategy for lunch. I think the parallel here is, regardless of what the law says, if people aren't convinced that doing something is the right thing, then they're not going to do it when no one's watching. No different than seatbelt usage. You can't get seatbelt usage up to where it needs to be unless people honestly believe that it is saving lives. I think we've gotten to that place culturally, and we need to get to a place culturally here in Michigan where people understand the science and believe in the science that masking and social distancing works.
Another issue is staffing is running short. Back in the first wave in the northeast part of the country and here, nurses and other healthcare workers could come in and rush to help and support us from other states. However, the spread across the nation has rendered the term hotspot useless and kind of quaint. That means even if you add beds at a field hospital or something here, there won't be the nurses and staff to support it. There are just no staff to import. In some states, they're even allowing COVID-positive health workers to stay on the job because they're so short-handed. And this is of huge concern. So what to do? Officials with the Michigan state government and health leaders all suggest to rethink your Thanksgiving plans. Remember Easter? Well, we're back there. Do not have get-togethers with multiple households is the recommendation. Go out and shop as little as you need to for groceries, things like that. Limit your trips. If our curve that is currently a straight line up doesn't change quickly, we're warned we're in for some even more dire straits and different types of state responses. Let me give you a little example. In nearby states, the city of Chicago is locking down for 30 days, and Ohio is on the verge of closing their bars, restaurants, and gyms again. I feel like it's important to note here that in Michigan, the Republican-controlled state legislature, who had sued earlier this year for more power to deal with this crisis, abruptly adjourned for the rest of their session yesterday. They said, according to Gongwer's Zach Gorchow, that there were no time-sensitive issues to address. And the rest of the story? There has been rampant speculation, with now some confirmation from one member of the chamber, that Republican state lawmakers are coming down with COVID-19 and needing to quarantine. Joining me on the line is Andrew Stein. He is the executive director of City Year Detroit. Welcome to Daily Detroit, sir.
Thanks for having me, Jer.
So, as always, I get extra excited about things that are happening in my own neighborhood, and I'm glad to be able to share another story of happenings in the neighborhood. You might have known, listeners might know about that Chroma building. We interviewed Sydney James, who did the large mural on the side of it. There's a ton of business activity happening right in that corner there. But this is something that's a nonprofit that's actually found a permanent home of their own, City Year Detroit. And City Year does some really great stuff, but I know that some of our listeners might not know City Year's reach. So, Andrew, can you kind of give people a baseline on what City Year does and its mission?
Yeah, for sure. So City Year is a national nonprofit. We work in 29 cities across the U.S., and the work is the same everywhere. We recruit young people between the ages of 18 and 25 years old from incredibly diverse backgrounds. And these young people, it's kind of like a domestic Peace Corps. They commit 1 year of their lives to full-time service working in public schools. So we call these young people Corps members. And here in Detroit, we have 116 Corps members that work in 11 Detroit Public School Community District schools. So at each of our schools, there's a team of about 10 Corps members that support that school all day, every day for the entire school year, Monday through Friday, from the time school starts all the way through after school programs.
Who are these Corps members? Because I know from my own personal experience that it's somebody that I think students can relate to.
Yeah, I think that's kind of our secret sauce is who these Corps members are. Like I said, they're all 18 to 25 years old. About 3/4 are college graduates. So, most of them are 22, 23. Most of them are from Detroit or the Detroit area and really diverse. So 60% young people of color, over 60% first generation college graduates and their family. And because they're, 18 to 25, they relate to students in a way that's different than maybe a teacher or a principal. They form really strong relationships with students, which then allows Corps members to more effectively help support students with their reading or their math or helping to improve their attendance or their behavior in school, because it's like working with your big brother or sister every day in school.
Well, and City Year has been around the city for a long time. I mean, I think, more than 2 decades, right?
Yep, 21 years.
Yeah, and so there's been a lot of children who have been, and young adults who have been impacted by this. Why is it that now that you're getting headquarters? I think there's a lot of people who say, well, there's COVID-19, there's all these uncertainties out in the world, but you guys are stepping forward in a way that I think makes a pretty bold statement that you're here to stay.
Yeah, so City Year has really evolved in Detroit and nationally over the last 21 years. We went from being just kind of a general service organization where young people would come to a year of service, but would do a variety of things helping out in the city. So we partnered with organizations like Blightbusters or Gleaners. It was about 8 or 9 years ago that we made this pivot to working full-time in schools and saying, how could we have the greatest impact? And so we started having our Corps members serve all day, every day in schools. And we saw really strong improvements in student attendance, behavior, and course performance in math and literacy. Now, Detroit, certainly the public school system has had its challenges over the years, But when Dr. Vitti started, he came to Detroit with a history of working with City Year in Jacksonville and in Miami before that. And so we've formed a really strategic partnership with the school district where we've been growing our program over the last 3 years from 70 core members to now 116 core members this year. And so as we've grown, the need for some more space has popped up. We were getting pro bono donated space by Henry Ford Health System in their executive office building, but we were really pushing on the walls of that space. And so we started a conversation almost 3 years ago now, working with Ben and Benji at Collier's, who connected us to the team at Platform, and we toured the Chroma building. I remember being there almost 3 years ago now, and it just felt like the building had this amazing potential. It wasn't far from where we were in New Center, and so we started this journey 3 years ago as Platform started renovating this building. Now, no one could have told me 3 years ago that we'd be moving into a new office space in the middle of a pandemic, but financially, we had the resources. Platform really worked with us to fit within our budget. And we're one of those organizations that long term is going to need office space. We need a space to train our core members. Our staff need a space to have kind of a central hub and a headquarters to come together. We're people within our organization. So, while working at home is working for some, I think there's a real desire for all of us to be together. So, once this is behind us, I imagine us really activating the space. And our hope is that we can open it up to others in the community as well, because for 21 years, we hit up a lot of places for free space to use, and we're feeling like we need to repay that back to others. So we're looking forward to that one day too, Jer.
For sure. I wanted to share with listeners, I've been in that Chroma building before you all got into it. And one of the things that strikes me is just so many windows, so much open views of the city, and it really opens up the space. I took kind of a virtual tour and went through photos and things, and it's a good looking space. But what was the thought behind the design and the care that was put to the space up there in Chroma?
Yeah, so we worked with Gensler, one of, if not the largest design firm in the world, and they've done amazing pro bono projects for us in our schools for years. So we approached Gensler, and again, they worked within our nonprofit budget and designed an amazing space for us. And one of the first things they kept telling us was, wait until these windows go in the building because it's going to change the entire feel. And it did. And then every single inch of our space is intentional. There's elements that are aligned to our pieces of the city or culture. We've got a whole wall of quotes from famous Detroiters that were passionate about social justice. We've got an amazing flexible space that, we can use when all 116 core members are in the building. It can also be divided up for smaller focused spaces. I mean, we said we don't want an inch of this space that isn't usable for some reason. And I think we've accomplished that for sure.
Yeah. You're looking for people to get involved in what you're doing. I understand you're constantly recruiting for new people to be a part of the project, especially when you're talking about those core members, right?
Students need extra support now more than ever. Our core members this year are working with students every day virtually, but we are also looking ahead to next school year. And right now we are actively recruiting and accepting applications for young people between 18 and 25 years old who want to serve with City Year next school year. So if you are in that age group or you know someone in that age group who wants to spend a year of their lives working with students, go to our website, cityyear.org, and make your way to our page about how to join the Corps. Now, I grew up in the suburbs of Detroit. I served as a Corps member 16 years ago, and I can honestly say it was the single most formative, best experience of my life. And so this is the type of thing that you can kind of only do when you're young. But if you're a young person who's passionate about helping kids, who's been animated by, the racial reckoning happening in our country, come serve for a year, help make a difference for a student, and then, go on to do whatever it is you want to do with your career.
Yeah, I will tell you that nothing replaces firsthand experience when you're trying to make change in a community and just getting involved. And it's an extremely rewarding thing. And I have known a number of City Year people over the years who all say the same thing that you do. I mean, you're not just saying it because you're the executive director, because I've heard that at least a dozen times over the last 6 years personally. So I'm really glad to talk to you, Andrew Stein from City Year Detroit, and I will make sure to put a link to all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Jer. You'll have to come by, visit us, neighbor, in the new space.
No doubt. We'll make sure grab a coffee at Milwaukee Cafe downstairs.
Yes, I love it.
Quick thing before we get into our conversation with Fletcher, that our show is powered by our members. Anything from $1 up to $150, it all helps out a ton. Our members are so very generous and help keep us on the podcast air. Is it air? I don't know. Anyway, thank you so much. Join us at patreon.com/Daily Detroit. Joining me virtually is Fletcher Sharp. I'm excited to talk to him. We're going to talk a little bit about sports at the end of this, but there is an event coming up this very weekend about the future of U.S. soccer, and Fletcher is actually hosting a panel about how to build an anti-racist soccer club, or building anti-racist soccer clubs. Fletcher, first off, why is this topic important to you?
It's important to me because soccer is a very worldly sport. It should be for everybody, and you should not be excluding people from it just because of how they look or how they sound or how they act or who they love, etc. So hosting a panel with so many esteemed people on it, like Christy Oshiro and Anthony Weems and Brandon Miller, 2 PhDs, 1 professional soccer player, hosting a panel of people who just get why this should be done properly and how we can get ideas out is just honestly, I don't want to sound cliche, but kind of a dream come true. It makes me feel like the work I'm doing to help push this forward is actually being noticed, and honestly being honored amongst so many really great and esteemed people is an awesome, awesome feather in my cap.
One of the things that listeners sometimes notice about our sports coverage is that we often go beyond the top line score. We try to add some context and also at times social context. Why do you think that's important to bring that to sports?
Because sports have a social impact. People might watch and say, oh, keep your politics out of my sports. Keep this. I watch this to escape these sort of things. And if you have that luxury and of being able to separate what's happening in real life from sport, that's fine. But a lot of the people who are participating in sports who you might think have their $20 million contracts or something, they don't have that luxury. A perfect example of this, a few years back, NBA player Thabo Cephalosha was in New York, just hanging out with a few friends. Someone had a mistaken identity, thinking that he, a 6'7" Swiss black man, was a person who committed a crime. Police officers beat him with batons and broke his leg and ended his basketball season. The person who they ended up trying to get was 5'10". So there's a big discrepancy in height between those two people, for sure.
There was an incident too with a Toronto Raptors official, right?
Yeah, Toronto Raptors player was racially abused by some police officers. And people think, oh, just because they're rich and famous, it doesn't affect. These people are affected very much the same exact way too. And they're talking about their own lives. And yes, while some people think you shouldn't be kneeling, you shouldn't be doing, it's their lives. They could leave the court and do something, and something could happen to them where they are now no longer alive, or they're maimed. Recently, there's a soccer player, Marcus Thuram, great player for Borussia Mönchengladbach out in Germany. He tried to go into his stadium and they wouldn't let him in. He has his face on the side of the stadium. They wouldn't let him in until he Googled himself to show that he's legit actually a person. It's just stuff like that where you're wow, how can this happen in today's climate? But yet it continues to happen. These things need to be addressed. And honestly, since sports are such a good way for people to actually focus on stuff, we won't know anything about what happens to presidential election, gubernatorial election, what your kid did at school yesterday. But let it happen during the Super Bowl. You'll remember it for the rest of your life. So if people want to use sports as a way to leave an indelible mark in someone's brain, I'm all for it. If it's going to help people understand stuff and it's going to make people pay attention, I'm 100% all for it. Definitely.
Well, as a host and a producer myself, I am cognizant of the fact that throughout United States and world history, sports has been where people have actually paid attention and made change. You think about for how long that African Americans could not play in Major League Baseball, how long different sports stayed segregated along with the rest of our nation. The sports in a lot of ways are a reflection of us and where our culture is at right now. And I appreciate having fun as much as the next guy, but I also think it's important in this world, in a situation where this country is going through so much, that we validate and talk about and do something about the real experiences that people are living every single day.
To your point about baseball being segregated, there are people alive when baseball was like being desegregated. Like it wasn't that long ago. People's grandparents are like alive for stuff like that. Same instance when black children wanted to go to school in Alabama and they were being pelted with really racist and awful insults and like food and such. Those kids are alive. Those kids are like 80 years old. People act like it's such a long time ago. It really wasn't. It wasn't even a lifetime ago. So like to have these people just say these things don't matter. It's such a long time ago. People bear these scars. These are real things people still have to live with and deal with and work through. For people to say like this isn't something that should be put on the screen with sports, it should be moved aside, it's a little bit disingenuous and a little bit hurtful, quite honestly, especially because they value the people that are on the court as long as they're just being silent and doing what they want them to do. And people should never have to do that.
Well, and even with the short amount of time that you're talking about, the one lifetime, we also need to think about the institutional weight since the beginning of our country. And in fact, even since, say, 1619, the institutional weight that has affected our culture and frankly has held large groups of numbers of people back. We can't forget that, and that's all part of the equation. But I do want to pivot really quick and talk about something on the field. This isn't Detroit or Michigan specific, but it's something I want to pull out, especially in the context of all the COVID coverage earlier in the episode, that the wave of COVID is lapping against its shore with an Ohio State game canceled from this weekend. Now, this had been down in the SEC for a while. There were a number of games canceled down south. But, you know, with this comment that I talked about is that the concept of a hot spot no longer exists. I wonder if the Big Ten is going to have to change its position.
They should, honestly, but they won't because they really want football. Now that football is back, they don't really seem to care much about the impact it's going to have, especially when you have some of those parents who are like, my kid wants to play, let the kids play, as if it's some sort of like other issue that's just being overly politicized. It's really not. These kids should not be on the field right now. The University of Maryland, currently 2-1, has to suspend all their football practices after a huge outbreak of COVID hit their football team and more. We talked last episode that I was on. Tom Izzo from Michigan State basketball contracted COVID recently. We should not be doing this. I understand if we were like on a downswing, if the country was like getting back towards like, you know.
Well, we had a few great weeks there, didn't we? We had a few great weeks where it was like, oh, this sucks. But I feel like a testing program, things like that can function in that kind of lower level, you know, where you set people aside. But looking at the numbers, listening to health experts this morning, listening to the governor, we are in a completely different situation than we were a few weeks ago.
Oh no, we had a few good weeks because people was still listening. People were wearing masks. People were keeping socially distant. People were trying their best to be uncomfortable, but like still, you know, be comfortable for other people. I was at Target with my girlfriend
Fletch.
a few days ago, and some lady was walking around without a mask, and we all looked at her and kept doing the mask motion. She looked at me like I was crazy. She got to the checkout line and was like, the person behind the register had like a face shield and a mask. And she's like, do you have a mask for me to wear? Lady's like, I'm getting ready to leave here anyways. Why do I need to wear a mask? And it's like, yo, we're in a pandemic. Like, that's we need to wear a mask. They're being nice about it. I wouldn't even let you in my establishment if you're not going to wear a mask. But like so many people are just be able to go inside. And honestly, it's because a lot of places are afraid if they try to get you to get out there without a mask, people are going to freak out and have negative reactions. And no business wants to have a negative reaction like that where people are knocking stuff over, getting mad about this. The reason why we're in a downswing now is because of people like that. We just are deciding, you know what? We're all going to hell in a handbasket anyways. I might as well just be comfortable. We can fix this. This is not an unfixable thing, but the more we decide to put ourselves in front of other people and the greater man, like it's going to create a problem. And yeah, maybe I'm just peddling some stuff I learned in high school because I went to an all-boys school that preached, you know, a man for others. Shout out to U of D. But like, I don't know. It's so disheartening to like look outside and see people saying, yeah, forget the other person. I'm going to do something for me. And like not be able to understand without even a hint of irony why we're getting worse and worse and worse. It's baffling to see that. But no, to the sports point, we shouldn't be playing football right now. Like we honestly should just stop, period.
I mean, I think we both know that that's not going to happen, but I wonder what will unfold over the next few weeks. And if we're going to get to, you know, I think before I was actually kind of thinking we would get to the championship if our community spread was lower like it was. I felt like we had a pretty good shot. But unless we get our handle around what's going on now, I'm just nervous. This is not going to happen.
We're going to get to the championship kicking and screaming. Like, we should not be going. I bet you they're going to have another massive outbreak for a team. But like, we're going to find a way to get to the college championship because people want their college football. The thing that's most disheartening for me is like, even after Ohio State had to cancel, they tried to find an opponent to play. Earlier in the year, Wisconsin had a similar thing where they had a team canceling them for COVID. They tried to find a similar team. I think they were going to play against University of Chattanooga. It ended up not working out because Big Ten bylaw states you cannot bring another team in from out of conference during conference play who's not going to adhere to our testing circumstances, which is like a good step to have. But people were upset. They're like, why can't we just find another team to play? Why can't we just do this? Now we have a bye week where it's going to hurt our chances of going to the championship. And like, people they're not even thinking about like the bodies. They're just thinking about like the numbers. Like, how can we get from point A to point B? Yeah, I can't go watch the game in person, but I at least want the game to happen. I don't get it. I'm all for, the extra testing if it's going to make players safe. I don't think they should be playing, period. But as much testing as they can do to like keep themselves safe would be fine. But if people are still finding ways to contract COVID even after they're being tested as many times as they are, we just shouldn't be doing this right now. If I were commissioner of the Big Ten, which I'm not, thankfully for a lot of teams, if I were commissioner of the Big Ten, it's, hey, you get a massive outbreak, your season's done.
That would give people the incentive to act properly, right?
It would.
Because that's, at the end of the day, this is what it comes down to. It's that community spread. It's that idea that, sure, early on we had some bar issues, and we still do on occasion, but a lot of this is being driven by 4 or 6 people, and we're having a different situation than we had with the NBA and the NHL, which were able to keep it at bay even during spikes because of the hard bubble. And when it's this level of spread, I don't think you can do it unless you've got a hard bubble.
Oh, very much so. And like, honestly, with the difference with those is a lot of those rosters are a bit smaller. An NBA roster is like 19 people at most. NHL roster is about the same, just about. College football is like 90 plus, maybe 100 people. So if you have 3 or 4 people who leave and come back and get sick, that could spread easily to everyone there. But to the point I was making, if I was commissioner, I'd talk to Maryland's AD. I'd be like, hey, man, sorry to hear you guys had that big hit, but guess what? Your football season's over. Tell your players, tell your kids, get ready for next season. Prep your basketball team to have the same response. That'd be the end of it. And if that came out, teams would be like, you know what? We need to make sure we neutralize the spread, because if someone gets sick and we get sick and our football season's over, they're going to be mad about that. But the only person they'll be able to be mad at is be mad at themselves, because they brought it upon themselves bringing COVID back into their team.
Well, I will leave it there. I'll remind folks that the Future of U.S. Soccer panel, that is coming up this November 14th. And Fletcher will be on from 2:30 to 3:30, building anti-racist soccer clubs. And I'll put a link in the show notes to the event by the Collegiate Soccer Society that's happening on November 14th. And if you want to talk to Fletcher, he's at Saint FDW on Twitter. And we are done for today. Thanks so much for listening to this kind of long haul episode of the podcast. Appreciate you so much. If you got feedback, 313-789-3211. That's 313-789-3211. You can also email me at jer@dailydetroit.com. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Jer Stays. Until tomorrow, take care of each other, and we'll get through this together.